Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
Hey, everybody.
Each month on the Next Reel Speakeasy, we invite a guest from the film industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. This month, we have two guests from the world of animation, the Bancroft Brothers, aka Tom and Tony Bancroft. From an early age, both Tom and Tony loved drawing and were passionate about the world of animation. So, they both pursued this passion at California Institute of the Arts, a Disney-sponsored art college that has churned out some of the greats. They both thrived there and, after graduation, found themselves hired into Walt Disney Feature Animation as animating assistants, helping on projects like the Roger Rabbit short Roller Coaster Rabbit and the feature The Rescuers Down Under. As they both developed and improved as animators, they found themselves bringing to life such memorable characters as Cogsworth the Clock from Beauty and the Beast, Iago the Parrot in Aladdin, young Simba and Pumbaa from The Lion King, Pocahontas from, well, Pocahontas, Mushu from Mulan, Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove, Took from Brother Bear, and many, many more. Lilo and Stitch, anyone? Tony also co-directed Mulan, for which he received an Annie Award for Director of the Year from ASIFA International. After working at Disney for a dozen years, they each ended up heading out to try other areas of animation. Tom ended up working with Big Idea Productions as a character designer and director for the VeggieTales series, while Tony worked as an animation director on Stuart Little 2. They both continued working hard in various capacities in the animation world, writing books that many animators consider essential to the craft, and hosting an amazing podcast of their own, the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. Tony is currently directing an independent CG animated feature called Animal Crackers, which should be coming out in 2017, and Tom is now artist in residence for Lipscomb University in Nashville and is the acting head of the animation program. Welcome to the show, guys. Glad to have you on board.
Wow, what a nice little intro. Thank you, Andy.
I love that intro. It's so silky smooth. Man, you guys are pros. I could tell.
Oh, you.
It's pretty rare that it happens so smoothly as that.
Nice to be here, Andy and Pete. Thanks for having us.
Oh, we started.
We're thrilled to have you guys here, mostly because I'm an only child and I like to be exposed to siblings anytime I can because my deep-seated family issues.
It's overrated. Overrated, Pete.
Yeah. Tom and I dream of having that life.
This is a first for us because we've never had two people on the Speakeasy because we just assumed that they could never agree on a favorite movie. But you guys happen to be unique.
Our wives call us unique, so that's good. But yeah, Tom and I have a very, very similar background. You would say we were born in the same womb, or we shared a womb together.
Womb with a view.
Okay, it'll get better from now on. Hang in there. But yeah, we do have a very similar upbringings where we love to animate. We love to draw ever since we were very, very young, like 3 years old. Our mom has the drawings that we did of Snoopy. We both did it. We were always very competitive. Mom, which one's better? That kind of thing.
Objectively, who was better?
Oh, well, me for sure.
Mom always thought me. Yeah, Mom always thought I was.
No, well, objectively is the word. She would always say, they're both equally nice. That's what she would say.
Yes.
Yes.
Every
correct.
time.
She would always say that about her love for us, too. I love you both equally. Right, Mom. Come on.
Yeah. Tony just pushed my head through the TV set, Mom.
Yeah. Now being a parent, I know that's a lie, okay? Because I definitely have a favorite.
You know what I love about your podcast and you guys is speaking of your mom, you have that whole story early on in your in the series of your podcast episodes where you talk about your mom and kind of the importance of the Blue Lagoon in your lives, which is a very funny story.
We'll have to do a speakeasy on the Blue Lagoon because that's actually how we learned about sex ed. You're right. That's what you're alluding to.
Exactly.
We tell a story on our podcast about the first time our mom took us to a movie, an R-rated movie, was Blue Lagoon. And it was really just to,
She was a single mom, and, this was her way. We didn't have a dad to sit us down and have the guy talk. She had to do it. So we all liked movies, and Blue Lagoon came out.
It's just tough. It's just tough halfway through, watching Brooke Shields and really enjoying the movie in a lot of different ways. And then your mom leans over and says, "Do you guys have any questions? Do you know that she's having her period right now?
Do you understand what's happening here?"
That's right.
Mom, yeah, we get it, Mom.
That's okay in a marriage relationship.
Yeah, they're not really brother and sister.
That's right.
Oh,
it's unspoken.
So funny.
Yeah. We'll do a Blue Lagoon speakeasy. All right.
That will be a really fun one to
treat.
do.
I don't know what I expected from that story. Like half of me thought, that you guys look over halfway through the movie and your mom has abandoned you there.
That would have been nice.
No, it was her. It was her talking halfway through it, trying to make sure that we were okay with coming of age as young men.
And I remember that theater being like half empty or less, and like every word she said echoing in that theater.
Yeah. She was very loud.
Yeah.
Very loud. Yeah.
Well, we are here to talk about the latent sexuality in another film.
Oh. What?
A Disney movie.
Isn't that right?
You guys didn't know. You guys didn't see this one.
Oh.
No, but yes, no. Instead of Blue Lagoon, we are here to talk about 101 Dalmatians, a Disney classic, and this is one you guys picked. So why did you guys pick this movie? What is it about this one that said we really want to talk about that one?
Well, because Tom and I we go to Disney Anna conventions, and what I love is when you get these young fans that always walk up to you and say, "Will you sign my 101 Dalmatian posters?" And I'm like, I didn't work on that, right?
Oh, okay.
It
Then
came out in 1961. I was born in 1967.
all right. Well, then
you do the math.
Yeah. Will you sign my Snow White then?
Yeah.
No, not that one
was
either.
1938.
Yeah.
To be fair, the dates on those posters are really tiny.
They are. Yeah. And there's a lot of tiny brains.
But it just shows the research. Yeah, it shows the research involved with our fan group.
To go along with that, a lot of times we do get, I mean, that's the question you get the most, right? With any kind of filmmaker, but especially if you're an animator, and especially a Disney animator, what's your favorite Disney movie, right? And so we kind of always had to have an answer, because that has happened quite a few times. And I think 101 Dalmatians, and the funny thing is we never discussed it, Tony and I, but I think 101 Dalmatians became my favorite at a certain point, and I can't remember when it was, but somewhere around Cal Arts, when I was attending Cal Arts. Because to me, it's just the perfect meld of story, animation, style, great, wonderful style.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of got it all.
I have a lot of reasons for loving it. And I also like to copy Tom. So whenever he said I love 101 Dalmatians, I was like, yeah, me too. I do too. Yeah, I did first. No, but it was a very, very important film in the Walt. You guys probably know this. You've done some probably looking up of trivia items on it already, but in the history of the Walt Disney Company, which Tom and I worked there for over 12 years in feature animation, we worked on the later films of the 90s, so your kids' childhood. But for us, 101 Dalmatians was something that we looked at, not when it came out in the theaters, but we discovered it more on, direct-to-video and watching it in probably re-releases and things like that. But such an inspiration of how the 90 Men, some of those great traditional animators, with just pencil and paper, good old-fashioned pencil and paper, created works of art, really created characters that jump off the screen. And for us as young animation students, it was so inspirational.
Well, and this was, some people say it was kind of the first modern Disney film, at least relatively speaking. I mean, the story takes place in 1958 and the movie came out in 61. So to that end, there's cars, there's TV. I mean, you've got all these puppies that are, just like modern children, all, good children addicted to their televisions, which I crack up about that every time I see it.
And smoking, lots of smoking.
There's lots of smoking. I like how they delineate, Roger's smoking is nice and clean and pure white, whereas Cruella's is that vile yellowish green.
Yeah, gray. Yes.
with her pink cigarettes.
In particular, there is adult affection. I joked about latent sexuality, but their relationship is we have these sort of paired relationships between the dogs and the couple, and it is a mature relationship. They're affectionate with each other. They touch one another like sort of mature adult people,
right.
And I found that fascinating.
I think it's funny that most people at Disney, especially when we were there in the 90s, and it seems like a kind of the cycle of the lifespan of an animator is once you become kind of mature in your art, there's this striving to do something more adult, not X-rated necessarily, but we all go through it. I want to make an animated version of Frankenstein or something like that. Why aren't we doing Star Wars? Every animator's kind of screamed that to some point. And for me, I think 101 Dalmatians was the 90 Men, the guys that were there, they were at their peak as an adults. They're not quite the 90 Men that we know them as in pictures where they're really old guys, but I think 101 Dalmatians was their urging of let's do something more modern. Let's do something that was maybe a bit more edgy too. And so I think what you're alluding at are things that they probably were desiring to do, but they were stuck in the rut of doing these fairy tales for so many years.
And you certainly can see it in the style too. They were all influenced by UPA style, which is a lot more blocky, like Gerald McBoing Boing and things like that. And that 60s kind of retro style that was, well, we call it retro now, but that was real popular in commercials and things like that. And you were starting to see, saw that in Toot Whistle, Plunk and Boom that Ward Kimball directed for Disney. And that started to find its influence finally with this movie into the feature films too. And that, and even Pablo Picasso and things like that, but especially Ronald Searle. Ronald Searle was a big influence in the style of this film.
You see that in the commercials, actually, when they have the commercials, and there's also that little talk show that they do at the end, which I love, which is something like,
Oh yeah.
Guess the robbery or guess the crime,
crime
or something
right.
like that.
Yeah.
Guess my crime, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's some made up little show, right? Like This Is Your Life kind of thing, but with criminals on there. And if you look at all the designs of the characters, and there's these like stuffy British folks that are like, were you a rapist?
Yeah, he did say that.
I don't think he actually says that in the movie.
No.
But they're guessing the crimes, and these
Right.
guys all look like Ronald Searle, who's a very popular illustrator and cartoonist at that time. All of his designs are very much in those. But the character design, which he was very influenced by Ronald Searle too, but the character design was mostly and largely at that time done by Milt Kahl, who was one of the 90 Men. And Milt was known to be an excellent draftsman. So the other animators would take a pass of the characters, but he would really do the final model sheets, which is what we use in 2D traditional animation.
He'd do like Tony does. He's like, move over. Let me get in here and do a drawing over that. This is how it's done.
Let me show you how this is done.
Yeah.
That was my
Nice
favorite.
try,
Of
Frank.
all the guys, he was the curmudgeon of the group.
Oh, yeah. Nobody really liked him too much, except for Marc Davis, who was I think he was just kind of a quiet teetotaler kind of individual, very, cerebral and that sort of thing. And I think he just
But I think it was also because Milt respected Mark because of his drawing ability. Like Marc Davis was probably, equal or second to Milt Kahl in drawing ability. And Milt saw that, and that's what he cared about, I think.
And it's such an interesting style because, because Sleeping Beauty had cost so much money and didn't make very much money at the box office when it was initially released, Walt Disney was kind of, in this panic, and they kind of, his old buddy Ub Iwerks comes up with this Xerox process of Xeroxing all the cells to make things cheaper and quicker and easier. My understanding is that the animators really took to it because, hey, it's my actual lines up there on the screen as opposed to, somebody, in inking and painting who had kind of gone over it and redone it. Those are actually my lines. And Milt, from what I read, he seemed to kind of be the driving force behind really liking that sketchy look and not having his people under him erasing ththose lines and doing all the cleanup and everything.
Oh yeah. When we were at CalArts, I'll tell a little story. Dave Mitchner was the head of the CalArts animation program for that 1 year, kind of in between two other people. And Dave Mitchner would tell stories because he was Milt Kahl's assistant for many years, cleanup assistant. Like he would go over Milt's stuff. And I can't remember if 101 Dalmatians was one of the films, but I know he would always talk about Jungle Book. So I'm assuming he worked on 101 with Milt also. But and he would talk about doing all those stripes on Shere Khan, cleaning up every single one and keeping them consistent and all that. But yeah, he talked about how Milt would even people he liked, like I think he got along with Dave Mitchner, but he would literally throw drawings at his cleanup assistants and throw them out of his room because
luckily they're made of paper, so
right,
it didn't hurt that much.
But
a nasty paper cut. Ow!
But that's a lot of work, Tony. Okay,
Yeah,
that could have been a week's
Yeah.
worth of work. Anyway,
That's true.
because he just he was a perfectionist and nobody could draw as well as him, and he knew it, and he would let you know. So him wanting to go right directly to his drawings, it kind of makes sense that he would not have to go through that pain and agony of throwing papers at people.
But, the other person that was really huge in the making of that movie stylistically, because Milt really contributed to the character design, but the background design and that xerography style that they adapted was really the production designer, or maybe he's credited as the art director, Walt Peregoy. And talk about he was like attitude-wise Milt Kahl without caffeine. So even more of a curmudgeon, a bigger cursor. This guy was like a true animation sailor. But Walt Peregoy is known to be one of the most frightening. He's passed now, unfortunately, but he was a very frightening individual because he would just yell and scream and complain about everything. But he was also a really great background painter and designer. He did a lot of the styling alongside of Ivan Earl. He was the head of backgrounds on Sleeping Beauty. You were mentioning that a moment ago. And he set the style, and he was the color stylist for 101 Dalmatians. And you could imagine around this time period, we're talking about 1961 is when it released. So, it would be late 50s. Bernie Fuchs was probably coming to age. There was a lot of illustrators and magazines that these guys were influenced by that had this kind of rougher stylistic approach. And so the xerography and utilizing that rough line and displacing it. I mean, you see in the backgrounds, they didn't do this with the characters so much, but the backgrounds, they literally drew a drawing of the background in pencil, Xerox that, and then painted roughly blocky shapes and stuff to represent the color shapes of, say, a couch or the living room. And then they offset the line drawing on top on the cell, and it gave you this kind of very stylistic, rough look to the background. And yet the characters, even though they had a rough line, were still pretty solid looking. So it almost gave you a feeling in a very modern stylistic way of an out of focus background or something like that, because there was a crispness to the characters.
And that had never been done before. It was so groundbreaking, and it was a faster technique too. Like, they were able to put out 101 Dalmatians at a lot cheaper price tag because of a lot of shortcuts. There's a lot of holds too, stuff that they wouldn't normally do in animation where the character would just freeze. You see it in TV animation a lot, but they do that a little bit more in 101 Dalmatians. They're careful about it.
And some repeating too, I noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that scene that you see in the I just watched it a moment ago too, just to refresh my memory, and I couldn't remember. I couldn't believe how many repeat scenes there was where they reused the animation, but they're what's his name? Roger is, it has Pongo on a leash in the beginning of the film, and they're going through the park, and they literally do the same gag twice, where he's like trying to start his pipe and light his pipe, and then all of a sudden he gets pulled by Pongo.
Right.
And they reuse that animation almost like a second later, and I'm like, come on, guys, really? I know you want to save money, but come on.
Hey, it worked. It worked.
In terms of cheaper, I think they did it with half the staff, right? I mean, Andy, did you find that they had 600 people on Sleeping Beauty and 300 on this one?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. So they really did chop it up.
I think there was layoffs in between, if I remember right.
I'm just curious on your perspective in the industry about how big a transition it really was from hand-drawn and inking to this Xerox thing. Are we talking like the earth-shattering shift of silent films to talkies? Is it that kind of a paradigm shift? How did that work?
It's not that big, but amongst that group within that studio, it was probably pretty huge. And that, one, it gave a totally different look that I think anybody could notice if you compare the two. But also, it meant a totally different pipeline now. So they no longer did they need the inkers. They still needed the painters. They would still paint the backs of the cells, but the inking part of it, the hand inking with the nibs and all that disappeared. You didn't need that anymore.
And that was a real art form too. I mean, if you've ever seen hand inked cells that they sell in auction for thousands and thousands of dollars, it's just beautiful, and what a crafted thing that is. But Tom and I, when we first started at Disney, we got a tour of the ink and paint department, and for this film, Walt had built a Xerox room. Now, we're all old guys with gray hair, so we know what a Xerox machine looks like. And hopefully the listeners out there, some of them have actually seen them. They're gone now for the most part. But it's like an Epson printer, but bigger.
But huge.
But back then, they didn't have those big printer machines. This was like on the forefront. And they actually had built a room. And it was so the process of xerography was almost like exposing photos, where they had a room where somebody worked in this dark room. It almost looked like your room. Because now I'm looking at you, and there's like, you're in the most pitch black room that I've ever seen before, and it makes me scared for you. But they had this room where it's like one person would be in there, and they would have a metal plate come in, and they would have to electrostatikize it, or however they did that. I remember this tour from, I must have been like 18, so forgive me if it's not fresh, but there was this whole very elaborate process of getting the toner onto the cells, and it was so archaic to what we know as the modern day Xerox machine. But it was all designed and built, and the ink and painters, some of them adapted over since they were losing their jobs of not being able to ink anymore. Some of them adapted to run those positions of making, putting the Xerox line on.
And what's funny is when they built the Disney MGM Studios, I worked at the Florida studio, and Tony was there the first year too, and they created a Xerox machine there. Same thing, like huge camera that pointed down, has a platinum, and has the trays that go from one room to the next, and literally within probably 2 years, we no longer did that anymore. It was all painted on the computer. So they only used it for like maybe one picture. I think Prince and the Pauper, Little Mermaid was the last, last Xerox Cell. It was the last Cell film.
Last Cell, yeah, and then everything after that was their new computer-aided ink and paint system.
It was all computers, so they no longer needed that big huge machine. So.
I was actually working. I think I told you guys I worked on that tour as a guide.
Oh, were you?
When I was down in Florida, I was an attractions host for the college program.
Oh,
and,
okay.
So you had to call them guests.
That's right.
We called them tourists.
You called them tourists, right? I called them guests. But it's funny because I worked there on the other side of the fish tank, and we would stare at you guys all day long. And that section was always empty. It just was, people would always ask about it, and I'm like, no, nobody is ever really in there. It's just like the big empty ink and paint part of the tour. It's funny that it was still there, but I guess times changed a lot quicker.
That's just a dinosaur we keep over there.
I was gonna say, did they just have taps playing over this loudspeaker the whole time, just subtly in the background?
They figured if they kept it long enough, maybe they could drill for oil in that area. I don't know, but
I was just looking. Walt Peregoy was the color styling, or credited as color styling.
Yeah,
working with Ken Anderson, who did art direction and production design. Yeah,
I didn't want to correct Tony, but I really do. So it's Ken Anderson that was credited as art director and production, right?
Production design. Yeah,
production design.
Yeah.
So,
but Walt's the one that takes credit for it. I've actually read interviews where he said, "I saved Disney Productions. If it wasn't for me working there all through the 60s and 70s, I really created their style.
Yeah,
that Xerox thing, that was me."
And that Ken Anderson, he just took all the credit. Yeah, no, I think I have heard him say that. So,
he calls Walt Disney a loser. He said, "If it wasn't for all of us artists, Walt Disney would be nothing. Nothing."
Wow, how funny. What an interesting character to work with, Walt.
Only he would put the F word in there, too.
Well, interesting commentary, particularly on this film, judging by reportedly how little Disney had to do with it himself.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't involved. Well, maybe that's why he took credit.
Walt Peregoy, he had an open door. No, but this was the era when Walt was very involved with the parks and stuff like that. There was several movies that he just kind of started to check out and feature animation. And, you hear stories from the animators and stuff like that, besides Walt Peregoy, that they're kind of bitter a little bit towards that time because Walt was like a father figure that was, very invested in everything that they were doing early on. But then once kind of the ball was rolling, he wanted to expand into parks and other things, so he got involved with
TV. He was getting into TV.
And TV.
Live action
Wonderful
movies.
World of Color.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sounded like he really didn't like this style at all and kind of felt like the beauty of the animation that they had been doing is all gone. And it sounded like he kind of blamed Ken Anderson for a long time. The way that Ken says, it's like pretty much up until a couple weeks before his death when he saw Walt walking around, and Walt kind of forgave him. So I guess it took a while, but I don't know. It's an interesting style of animation, and I know it has its its fans and it has its detractors. But I've always loved this xerography style, the very sketchy look of it. I think it's just such an interesting way to do it, and it does feel so different. I mean, it lasted for about 10 years or so, up until kind of the new age with Black Cauldron or so, right?
You had Aristocats, Jungle Book, Robin Hood,
Sword in the Stone.
They all use that same process. Yeah.
Well, because it saved them so much money. You were saying that earlier, Andy, and it's true. It's that once they created this new process and laid off all those inkers, it wasn't just about saving the money on the inkers too. It was just a faster process. And I think, like you were also saying, I think the animators got a kick out of it that now for the first time, their drawings were up on the screen.
Yeah.
I mean, you think Milt Kahl had an ego already? Come on, now he's a rock star.
And you
Right,
really
that's right.
saw a shift. I mean, just to get into the detail of it, around I'd say Oliver and Company, because that still had that chunky line to it a little bit. But you started seeing that the cleanup artists really started coming into their own, and the line work. And Tony and I both did cleanup on our first films. Mine was Rescuers Down Under. Actually, both of us did cleanup
Yeah,
on
we did.
Rescuers Down Under. And so
I was sitting right next to you, Tom.
yeah,
Remember that?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was erasing your drawings for you. Yeah, that's not right. Like this.
Fixing them. No, let me do that.
I was fixing them.
Yeah.
But anyway, by about Little Mermaid, the cleanup became really more of an art form, kind of like ink and paint did, or the inking did earlier in the 40s. And so you started not noticing that we still were doing the same Xerox kind of a process all the way to say, like I said, Little Mermaid. But I don't think people look at Little Mermaid and go, oh, that doesn't look as nice as some of the
Right.
classic films. But they will say that about 101 or Aristocats or Robin Hood, because they were using just like the pure rough animation line, just tied. They called it tightening it up. They would kind of take a kneaded eraser to the animator's line and just add some cleaner, tighter lines to say, yeah, instead of these 6 lines, it's these 2,
Right.
I mean, but it would still be kind of chunky.
Is that the in-betweener? I get confused with all these animation titles. Is that an in-betweener or?
The cleanup department comes after animation, and they are doing in-betweens and keys. They're doing all the drawings, but yes, they are adding the in-betweens in a lot of cases, but they're doing the final line.
Gotcha.
And like I said, by around Roger Rabbit Mermaid, they were laying a piece of paper over the rough animation and doing a whole nice, clean, tight line drawing and adding detail where needed and that kind of thing. That process back on 101 wasn't really the same. They were literally using the same drawings the animators would do and maybe kind of knock them back with an eraser and tighten them up a little bit. But you still had the animators drawing that was getting Xeroxed as the line work. About by Mermaid and a little bit before that, they were putting a piece of paper over it and redrawing it completely in a nice tight line. And that's what really made it kind of go to the next level of being a little tighter line.
Well, and that's actually a really interesting note because in many ways, the style, that sort of 60s industrial chic style, was very forgiving for 101 as a transitional piece, right? I mean, you're already offset the color of the background. You're already looking at what look like construction marks, in just the background and the multiplanar camera and all these kinds of things. So just seeing a few extra sketch marks on the main character design doesn't cry foul in your brain, I think.
Yeah, and I love it personally as an animator. I was just, like I said, I was watching it again today, and you could see there's certain keys that the animator, like key drawings, key poses that the animator did that the cleanup person just kind of barely roughed out, tied it down and just erased a little bit of the line. So there's sometimes where you'll see a circle, show up in the head.
You see a line under the eye to the nose on Roger.
Construction lines.
Construction stuff. And it's like, that's normal for us when we do our animation tests and stuff. That's what we kind of grew up on. But to see that on the screen is really rare, because even after 101 Dalmatians, they got more sophisticated with how they tied down the drawings. And like Tom said, they started to do another process where they put another piece of paper on because the animators were like, "You're losing too much of my animation. The jewels are being lost." And so they blame the cleanup people for losing too much of what they had created in their original drawings. So, there's a whole political side too. But I love this one because 101 Dalmatians just has a freshness to it. They were kind of trying to figure out how to make this look happen. And you can even see some scenes where, speaking of character design by Milt Kahl, I remember I've seen in books and stuff, there was some earlier designs of Pongo and Perdita, particularly Pongo, where he was a lot thicker faced and probably looked more like a Labrador than a Dalmatian.
No, more like a Great Dane. Almost.
Yeah.
He had a big
muzzle, big nose, and I remember hearing that there was kind of a fight about that between Milt Kahl and I think it was either Frank Thomas or Ollie Johnson that was really pushing for this other look. And Milt had to go over a lot of the early drawings, the early scenes by Frank Thomas and those guys that were drawing it differently, and said, "No, it's got to be like this." And there in the opening title sequence, there's still Pongo that is all drawn in kind of rough drawings. He hasn't been filled in yet because it's got a great title sequence too. We could do a podcast just on I love the title sequence, but it kind of shows the style choices that they use through the title sequence where they're introducing who did what and talking about Ken Anderson and giving credit. But there's one drawing of Pongo that comes to life, and he's animating while it shows all the key animators, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, are being listed on the title, and it's animating as he's kind of looking and nodding towards. And that Pongo in particular, if you look at it, has a very big jaw. It's very reminiscent of one of the older Frank Thomas designs.
There's a couple scenes in there too. I noticed at the beginning of the film, when he's going to get Roger because he wants to take him on into the park to go after the girl. And there's a couple scenes in there that they either didn't change enough or they just didn't change at all. And he has that big muzzle too. So there is some of the old Pongo in a couple scenes.
Well, no, it's I mean, talking about all the different people involved in kind of coming up with these designs. I mean, we should mention that this is based on a novel by Dodie Smith. And Bill Peet is actually the one that Disney kind of put in charge of doing the story and coming up with it. And it sounds to me like he was actually the only person who did story, which sounds kind of like a rarity. But it sounds like he also, my understanding is the way that it works in the world of animation. I mean, he might write the script, but then he also pretty much storyboards the entire thing. And he kind of came up with some of the character, the basics, some of the foundations at the time, right? Is that how that worked?
Well, and here's the thing. This is something that a lot of people don't know is there were no scripts back then. So when it says story by Bill Peet, and you're right, that is rare. It's usually a list of story artists. But in this case, it was just Bill Peet. And the rumor is that he did most of, if not all of it, all the storyboarding. But they don't write a script. He would just then, he may write an outline and maybe shares that with Walt. They discuss it, whatever. But basically, he's writing the story in storyboard form by doing a bunch of drawings.
Yeah, he was so prolific, but he was the first one on too. So even before Ken Anderson and some of the other group that joined later to help develop the style and the look of it, Bill was already cranking away. And you hear some of the old guys talk about how they would go upstairs and see, check out 101 Dalmatian that Bill was doing by himself. And they were just amazed. It was always very inspirational. There was very high regard for Bill Peet as a storyboard artist because he was prolific, yes, but he also created just fun bits of entertainment that animators love to animate.
Now he was more of a writer, not so much an animator. I guess that would be because he'd been around since Pinocchio, right? But he's not one of the 9 old men.
No, he's not. But he was a story guy. So what that meant was because there weren't scripts and really writing, it wasn't part of the process. That didn't come to Michael Eisner, believe it or not.
Wow.
So
in the 80s.
In the 80s. Yeah. So
I need a judge's ruling on that though. How did they know what to make when do the words come in mechanically? How do they know what to say?
The story artists would be adding the words. They literally were
as
writing
they're animating?
it. Well, that's the thing. They're not animating. They're doing like a comic strip.
In storyboards. Okay.
So storyboards are like a comic strip, right? But there's millions of them, right? And they would write a little line underneath it to say, and then Pongo says this. And so they're writing the script as they're storyboarding it. And that process did not change until, like I said, Michael Eisner came in and he said they got a pitch. Him and Jeffrey Katzenberg got a pitch when they first came in, took over Disney basically. And they got a pitch of, what was it, Great Mouse Detective? I think.
Great Mouse Detective.
And they pitched him the whole movie. It took them 3 hours. Here's a new board. And then a guy would walk around and pitch with a stick and tell the story and go through it. 3 hours later, they go into
and Michael and Jeffrey are just looking at each other going, what the heck is this? They didn't know what they were seeing.
Yeah, they go back to their office later and Jeffrey's like, do you even know what the story was? And Michael's like, I have no idea. They could not understand.
I can't remember those first 10 boards. That was 2 hours ago, right?
These guys are short.
Wow.
So, one that speaks to the brilliance of Walt. I will say that. I think that he was a story genius and that he could work like that. He could work with his people. He could retain things. He could, think about it the next day and come in and say, this sequence here. And again, it was a slower process too. They would re-storyboard and re-storyboard. It wasn't like they just do it once and rework the film. But from that point on, Jeffrey and Michael said, no, we need scripts from here on out. You could storyboard it, make changes and all that after the fact, but we need to start with a script.
And that's pretty much how it still goes now. They'll write the script and then storyboard it out.
Yeah, and it changes drastically.
Sure.
And animation is unique in that regard, and that's why I think it existed that way for so long, because the visuals are really key. The characters don't exist in real life, as I hate to drop that bomb on you. So
hey, I've seen Roger Rabbit, man. Come on.
Yeah. So those drawings, those little sketches to suggest kind of action and what's going on and expression and emotion are so key to making it come to life and the story to evoke some kind of emotional response. For Walt and for his artists, that's just how they thought. They just thought in pictures. They started in the silent era, when there was no dialogue. So it just kind of everything came out of that for them. And but not for Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who were TV guys, basically.
How did the three directors split up tasks? I know the directors Clyde Geronimi, Hamilton Luske, and Wooly Reitherman, who was one of the nine old men, right?
Yeah,
right.
How does that work as far as like what they're doing? My understanding is it's kind of like they each have a sequence. Is that how it kind of gets split up when you're directing animation?
Yeah, back in those days, they did have sequence directors all the way up to Great Mouse Detective. Actually, you'll see 3 to 4 directors oftentimes on some of the credits, and later on, again, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg kind of went against that and started to bring it down a little bit. But yeah, sequence directors was kind of how they did it for a while, where they would have, because Walt was kind of the story guy, like everybody just, was subservient to what Walt wanted with the story. But the other guys all came from animation for the most part. All 3 of those guys were animators at one time. And so they all kind of grew up out of that. And their biggest job was to make sure that kind of the story that Bill, Pete, and Walt came up with, that they kind of ushered it through the process to make sure that the design, the style, and the animation was consistent.
There's so many different departments, and a lot of people don't think about that either. They only think about, well, I've heard of storyboarding and I've heard of animation, but you got the background painters and you got the layout artists that draw the backgrounds that the painters paint. You can paint too. You have the camera moves and stuff like that, and the camera department.
Effects animation, yeah.
Effects animation. So that's why even today you normally have on an animated film at least 2 directors, because there's so many different departments and hundreds of different people, and they're all overlapping too. So you got to be like, there's a scene in animation right now that's at the end of the film. There's a scene over here that's in background painting, and it's from the beginning of the film. There's some special effects being done that's for the credit sequence. I mean, they're all going on simultaneous, and you got to be able to go, all right. So they usually split up the directors too. So at least in the sequence directing phase, like 101 Dalmatian, they would probably go, oh, well, that's your sequence, Ham. You go look over there, and Clyde, you're going to be in story today because your sequence is being worked on in story because they had revisions, and that's how they would sort of split it up. And you could keep 3 guys pretty busy over, what did they make them every 4 years back then?
Yeah, not quite 4 years, but there was long distances, 2 years at least in between, sometimes 2 to 4 years in between each film.
Yeah.
Wolfgang Reitherman, I think, was known to be kind of the guy that would work with the voice talent. And on this one, had some really special voices. A lot of them came from, British films and actors like that. But I read a story somewhere online about Anita, the voice of Anita. That's the wife to Roger, one of the humans. And she actually tried out for Cruella De Vil, if you can imagine. And she actually read against Walt. The story that I read said that it was Walt that was helping to audition for the film in the beginning. That's probably before he got pulled away and stuff and other stuff. But yeah, he had her read for Cruella, and she just said, I think I'd rather try out for Anita. Is that okay? And then they reread her, doing the whole script again with Anita, and Walt loved it.
It's so funny how things like that fall in, these little happenstances like that. Because, I mean, Betty Lou Gerson, who does Cruella, I mean, it's such an iconic character, and the way that she speaks it fits so perfectly with the way she acts and everything. I mean, it's just, she's so great. It's so fun to listen to her play that part.
She's
animators. I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead.
Pete, I'm sorry.
I'll answer to whatever you call me.
Yeah.
Whoever Scott is. Scott, wherever you are, keep going.
Yeah, Scott. Yeah. Because you have words of wisdom, Scott. No, but what I was going to say.
That guy, Pete, he's full of it. But Scott, you're on board, man.
What I was going to say was that animators get excited about voice talent and really good voices. Yeah. And Cruella would be a great example of that. They will just fight over those scenes. I had that when I animated Mushu in Milan with Eddie Murphy. All his lines were gold. He didn't, none of them were like, there's not much going on in this line. Everything he was 100% on.
I did Kronk in Emperor's New Groove, Patrick Warburton. Once I heard his voice, I was like, I gotta get on that character. I want that character so bad because he was so awesome. But Tom's right. There's a richness in vocal acting. Now, for those that grew up in live action and don't know too much about animation, a lot of times studios in the past have tried to bring in big actors. Let's get Tom Cruise. He's an A-list actor and whatever. And I won't mention names of studios or executives that make those choices.
But when Michael Eisner said, "Oh no, go ahead."
But when Jeffrey Katzenberg hired not every actor, just because they're a big talent and a big name and are bankable, doesn't mean that they could do good voiceover work, because it really is trying to create a theater of the mind. They're trying to really, they have to be a little broader most of the time for animation.
Two words: Matt Damon.
That's right.
In Spirit,
Stallion of the Cimarron.
Oh yeah, that's right. Spirit.
Horrible.
Or Angelina Jolie was in a couple films too. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, she also was in Beowulf, but I mean the whole movie kind of ended up fitting with that. It's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine, but still everything's rather stilted in that one.
They made it look like her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. You kind of hear that with some people where they cast actors and they go, "No, we don't want you to do a voice. We just want you to be yourself."
Yeah.
And sometimes it ends up working really well. Like Tom Hanks as Woody. I mean, he becomes that character. I mean, he's really kind of comes to life with it and everything. But then sometimes when somebody else is just being themselves, it really just ends up falling flat. Like that, something about it, like their brain is just not clicking with the world of animation or something. But
well, this was back in the time when Walt really was kind of handpicking voice talent, and the animators were very involved. I talked about Wooly Reitherman, that he was kind of a casting director and did a lot of the recording and stuff at the time at the studio. But they really were about not necessarily big name talents. You don't see, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. or whatever, just throwing out a name of somebody that was big in that era, because they didn't cast those big kind of larger than life A-list actors and stuff. One, they thought it was idiotic and they'd never be able to record it or afford them. So a cost thing was always there. But two, it was just about who's the best voice.
Right.
And that really became the philosophy that John Lasseter gravitated to, because he came out of this, the late 70s at Disney Animation. And so he gravitated to that when he started Pixar. You don't see those big names so much in Pixar movies. They go after B-list actors, TV stars, whoever is right for the part. And those guys get cast. And that's really how an animated movie should be cast. But we've kind of lost that. And it was because of Eisner, because of Jeffrey Katzenberg, that star power became, and marquee sellability became the main thing when you're casting.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, Rod Taylor played Pongo. I mean, I guess you could argue he was probably the biggest star that they cast for this particular film. I mean, he was in The Time Machine right before this. He had been in Giant. He ended up in Hitchcock's The Birds shortly after this. Interestingly enough, though, I didn't realize this. He actually was in Open Season, much later in his life, obviously, and he was Winston Churchill in Inglourious Bastards with Quentin Tarantino.
Really?
So
That's great.
Wow. So funny.
A lot of versatility. I could play a dog, a bear, or Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
That's quite a resume.
Yeah.
He was a great voice for it too, and I think that's it's interesting that you say that you made mention of the fact that the voice is something that you really look for. Obviously, you look for it as an animator, but it's funny. We had Steve Miner on the show last month, and he made the exact same comment. And of course, he's directing horror films, but he made the exact same comment for young actors: is to focus on your voice, find a unique voice for yourself, and that will take you very, very far.
I think it's great advice, especially if you want to get into voiceover work. Obviously, if you got an ugly mug, then you better put it into the voice for sure.
says the team of podcasters.
That's right.
Yeah.
Animator, podcasters.
Yeah.
That's right.
We didn't
People
get in it
behind
for
the
our
scenes.
voices. It's pretty obvious. You guys are better at that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about, if you guys don't mind, is the live action reference, because people talk about all the time about live action reference and the use of it in these old Disney films. And for a long time, when we first started there, Tom and I, back in the late 80s, early 90s, live action reference was kind of a thing of the past, really. But this film did it right in a lot of ways. And I think that's one of the things that I love about 101 Dalmatians also, is that the use of live action reference is barely visible in the way that you don't go, oh, well, that looks just totally outside of the norm of an animated cartoon style. It's too realistic.
Well, Tony, take a step back. Describe what you mean by live action reference for the people who.
Yeah, sure. Back in the days, all the way back to Snow White, Walt would bring in real actors, live action actors, most of the time from the theater, because they tended to be a little broader.
Rarely, but sometimes they would be the voice actors too, acting it out.
Sometimes, yeah. Right.
Like Briar Rose.
I think in Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Briar Rose, and I think the gal from Alice in Wonderland that played Alice, I think she was also the live action reference too.
Yeah.
Catherine Beaumont, I believe it is. But that was kind of something that Walt started, and it really helped the animators. They would shoot not every scene. That would be a little kind of crazy, I think. And they would just shoot like from one camera angle a series of scenes, just like a stage play, right? And they would just and they would block out the action basically. So just like you would in a live action movie or a theater show, Walt would block it out. The directors would block it out. And it became that filmed live action reference was helpful to the animator. He would get it like a month later. You would get your scene cast to you. Okay, you're doing this scene of Roger, and he's coming down the stairs, right? And this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Is in the beginning when Roger's coming down the stairs, and he's got a little song in his head. He's working out, because he's a songwriter in the movie, and he's working through. Something about Cruella De Vil, Cruella De Vil. Da, 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 da. I think that's what he's singing as he's bebopping down the stairs. But the acting is so convincing and so real, and yet so cartoony still, and in the style of the movie, that it's really impressive. So Milt Kahl, I think, was the animator that did that scene. And he had live action reference of an actor coming downstairs and doing that action. But he would take not every frame and trace over it like later films by Don Bluth, if you know who he is. Don Bluth used to like trace for Anastasia and some of those early movies that he did. The animators would literally trace over and just kind of change the character design basically. But Milt would actually just look at it and go pick out key poses. Oh, I like how he kind of flicks his pencil in the air as he says this line, or he says this little part of the lyrics, or he would, certain poses, or how he kind of hit the steps in kind of a ba 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 ba. He would pick up little elements and ideas from the live action reference, but really then make it his own. And I think that's key, because an animator is an actor with a pencil in this case. So it was the live action reference, the vocal actor, the vocal performance, and the animator together that really makes Roger coming down the stairs in this case.
And that process, literally, they would make like photo plates of either every frame or every other frame of that live action film shoot, and they would blow it up and peg it so they could put those pictures, basically it'd be photographs now of every frame of that action of him coming down the stairs, the actor, And so now they could put paper over that and draw over it and use it as reference and make it into Roger. We use that same process all the way up to Pocahontas. We were shooting live action and getting photos, what we'd call the photo pegged stats, and be able to draw over it. Roger Rabbit used it extensively, but more for being able to know where the live action is and be able to put Roger in that world, draw him on a separate piece of paper. So it's all the same process, really. And you're right, Tony, like Tony said, if you just trace it and just kind of change it a little bit into that character, you get a really stiff performance, and it's basically rotoscoping. It's not really using live action reference. It's more like rotoscoping.
And then you end up with the what am I forgetting? The Polar Express types of films. When you take that all the way to that extreme, you end up at that end of things.
Well, yeah, that's CG,
or Lord of the Rings, or the original Lord of the Rings when they made
Ralph Bakshi.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. That's rotoscoping for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what Ralph Bakshi did back in those days was they were totally just tracing over.
Right.
They would put the actors in the same costumes, and even so if it was supposed to be like a troll or something like that, you'd get a little midget and put him in. Sorry, little person. I meant that, and put him in a costume, and they would have him run around, and then the animators would just trace over that costume.
I'm offended.
Basically.
And you know who else is?
It's okay. I can say that to Tom because we're twins, but Tom's a little person.
You offended Scott.
Scott is also offended.
Yeah.
Scott. He's my favorite
little tiny little friend.
Oh. Well,
he's in my pocket right now. Come on, Scott. Stop it.
Well, speaking of live action models, just as a fun little tidbit side note, Cruella De Vil's live action model was Mary Wickes, who was Laverne, the voice of Laverne in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And I met her. I was the original supervising animator of all three of the Gargoyles when Mary was on, and I went to her first recording session. We ultimately had to recast because she died early on in the process. Mary did.
So sad.
So
yeah.
So Marc Davis did Cruella, and I mean she's kind of big, huh? Kind of an iconic character that he ended up creating here. And this is right on the heels of Maleficent, another incredibly iconic character.
That he did. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, he's and then who else did he do? He did Tinkerbell, right?
Tinkerbell, let's see.
He's known for
Bambi.
Tinkerbell and
everybody knows Tinkerbell has a dark side.
Right.
But he also did Alice in Wonderland. He and Milt, Tom, this is going back to what Tom was saying about how Milt and Marc Davis were very close friends because they were the guys that, because they drew so well and they were such great draftsmen, that Walt would always give them the really realistic characters. Mm-hmm. And they hated it because they wanted to have fun and do all these cartoony characters and sidekicks oftentimes. But they tended to do, Briar Rose and things like that. So Marc also did Briar Rose and Princess Aurora, Sleeping Beauty, whatever you want to call her. She's got all three names in the movie. But yeah, he did her also.
And Bambi. He literally was such a good artist that he was a story artist, and he was doing concept art of Bambi, a lot of very realistic drawings of deer anatomy and things like that, because he was so well trained in animal anatomy too, even before he came to the studio. He was a very traditionally trained artist and painter. That when Walt would see his Bambi storyboards, he'd say, I want it to look just like that. And then he got Milt and those guys to say, you got to train him to become an animator. So they literally trained him
how to animate.
They taught him how to animate just because Walt wanted to see his drawings on the screen, not just in the storyboards. They were so good. And so, yeah, I mean, this is fast forwarding many years later, and Marc finally got his chance. Cruella De Vil is like a dream, an animator's dream for sure. With how caricatured her face is. I mean, it's literally a skull.
Oh, those cheekbones are crazy.
Yeah, cheekbones out to here. Yeah, it's crazy. And yet,
I have a Xerox copy. Speaking of Xerox I can't even say the word. xeroxography.
Let me get Scott.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott will get it. No, but speaking of Xerox, I have a Xerox copy of an entire scene, the very first scene of Cruella De Vil when she burst through the door and you first meet her, and she said, "Puppies," and something like that. Did I hear puppies? And she's got this huge fur coat on, right? It's an all white fur coat. This is before she gets the idea. She's now she wants to get in. Fur is too boring for her, and really the plot is, I want Dalmatian fur because I hear that's the best.
She's like the original hipster.
Right, yeah.
yeah, that's right. Coffee, it's got to be single, bean coffee.
Well, she smokes pink cigarettes, so we know she's hoity-toity, right?
Yeah, she is. And in the movie, she's actually Anita's college. She's her old college roommate.
Yeah, you forget
which
that.
I find that's the movie I really want to see.
Right.
Yes.
The college days.
Anita and Cruella like in college.
Yeah.
You know what? That actually makes it a much more interesting kind of story, too, because Cruella has such a human kind of backstory. It makes her a much sort of broader tapestry or broader brush to paint with, and much more interesting. You almost see, and I don't know, I may be watching into things a little bit too closely, but it almost feels like as she derails as a character, the animation of her character derails along with it. Like by the time she wrecks the car at the end, she's just like sketched. Like we don't even need to, we're phoning it in.
Her eyes are those like hypnotized eyes.
Right.
Like this,
she's a metaphor. It is broken
I think they're
down.
running out of money towards the end of the film.
She gets really
they
broad.
put so much energy into those first opening sequences that you're right. Towards the end of the film, from a production standpoint, production value, it does kind of fall apart. There's more limited animation to it. There's like these weird hold poses where it freezes and her eyes are going around. It's like, what is that?
Yeah.
What movie is this now?
And I want to be respectful of your time, guys, too. But I know we're running out of it. But I wonder if you could comment just a little bit on the car, like how they did the cars using the model straight to plate. That is fascinating. Can you talk about that?
It really is. They literally, and you've seen, there's pictures out there, and it was in the Illusion of Life, Frank and Ollie's book. And they show a picture of this car. They actually created a 3D model, not computer model, but an actual model of the,
like out of cardboard or foam core or something, right?
Yeah, it looks like foam core. It's like all white, or they painted it white, and then they would literally go along every edge and paint that edge black, so it looked like it was a drawing basically of this car. And then they would, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they were doing stop motion. I think they were doing actual real time with poles and stuff like that, almost like it was a puppet. Having it go up and down and like be on a road and go up a hill, and they create a little bit of a set. And like, if I remember right, the snow is even when it crashes in the snow, you see
like
the
sand.
snow it puffs up. Like that was actually on the set too. And so they shot live action basically of this model doing all the actions, and then composited it. They then probably used xeroxifimation, whatever we call it.
I like
xerography, Tom.
Yeah.
It's xerography.
They would they would photocopy those onto the cells, and now they had the emotion, and then they would animate the characters to that, or they'd actually photocopy it onto paper, then animate the characters to it, add them to it on another piece of paper, and then
this is all
copy them both.
This is all because they were too lazy to actually draw a car.
Okay. No, they were all too lazy to create computers to animate it in a computer.
This is like a guy sitting in his recliner chair going, I can't reach the remote control, so I'm going to make a rocket ship to fly me over there. It does sound like that.
It's funny though.
It's
such a fascinating tool to have integrated into this. It makes you wonder, like, what was the intention of doing this? Did Walt and Ub, who kind of helped come up with that, were they talking, going, how can we create a more solid three-dimensional car that doesn't have that slight frame shifting when you change perspectives on it and stuff.
Well,
like
I mean,
that.
this is totally a precursor to 3D animation, computer
absolutely,
animation.
yeah.
Because obviously, if computer animation had been around, and that didn't get introduced into Disney films until Great Mouse Detective, by the way, that in the Gears, the Clockworks, when they have the fight at the end of the movie. That was
in the London
That was
Tower,
the very
right.
first computer animation. At
I thought it
Disney.
was. Didn't they use some in the cauldron for the actual cauldron in the Black Cauldron? I thought I read that.
I don't think so.
You know what?
Nobody
Did you
watches
hear
that
that?
one,
I
so
don't know
nobody
either.
remembers.
Yeah. What movie?
That could have been very unlazy effects animators that actually drew it. So I'm going to say that.
Or
I think Tom's
they,
right.
'cause
I think
they
Wade
did
Mouse
the
is
model
first time.
thing. What they did in 101 with creating the model and the whole bit and live action shooting it. They did it again in a couple other movies. It could have been Black Cauldron also. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that movie since I was a teenager. So I don't know.
It's outlawed. I think they put it in the Disney
It's in the
vaults,
vault.
never to be
That's
seen again.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You have to go to Russia to see it, I think.
Yeah, they have a bunch of copies there.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
It lives there. It's like their favorite movie.
It's buried with all the copies of that ET video game.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard
I saw
about
that
that.
documentary. Yeah, that was fun.
Oh,
yeah.
the whole. What was that? What was that? An Atari game, right, Pete?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
it was
it. And
There-
they buried him
There's
in
a
the desert
documentary.
somewhere.
Yeah, I saw that documentary.
Right, there's the whole documentary about it. Right. You can see him uncover it.
So moving forward, what I think is interesting, this kind of stepping away from the film now, and after its release and everything, this actually won a BAFTA award for Best Animated Film. Apparently, the British were way ahead of us as far as nominating things for animated, or even having a whole category for animated film. Granted, it won against two short films, or a short film called The Do-It-Yourself Cartoon Kit, which was a 6-minute Bob Godfrey short, and then another one called For Better, For Worse, which I couldn't find any information about. But the Bob Godfrey short looks awfully like Terry Gilliam style, and like that. I don't even know what you call that kind of animation, but it's just like
it's like paper cutout. Yeah,
paper cutout.
Yeah, paper
stuff
cutout.
sort of thing. So that's what it was up against. Luckily, it didn't win,
gosh.
so it's got that going for it.
The technical term for that is poop animation. You just poop it out.
Well,
Oh.
well, yeah. And as Jeffrey Katzenberg once told us when he was comparing Pocahontas to The Lion King, he said, I don't really care about awards. I don't want the Oscar. I want the Bank of America award for the most money made.
And he did it.
Wow. He did. Yes, indeed.
And that's what Walt got with the 101 Dalmatians. He might not have 101 Dalmatians didn't score maybe, best song and things like that. There was only 3 songs in the whole movie.
Yeah, right.
But they did win the Bank of America award. So it kept the studio open.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It proved that Disney could make movies on the cheap. Just to go into the numbers here, Sleeping Beauty was made for $6 million, and this one was actually made for $4 million. In today's dollars, that's a bit over $32 million. So it's still a pretty decent budget. Now, the what it actually made, it gets a little messy because when these movies get re-released, I mean, this had re-releases in 69, 79, 85, and 91. All of the box office receipts kind of get a little jumbled. But what I was able to find is on its initial release, this movie made $14 million domestically, which is about $113 million in today's dollars. And it was the international top earner, and I believe it still is for 1961. So
Wow.
That's amazing.
it did pretty well for itself. And with all of the different re-releases that it's had, it ended up making a total gross of just under $61 million, which is almost $223 million adjusted. And we do this little thing on the show, an adjusted profit per finished minute, which is how much it really kind of ended up making per minute of film that was released. It made just over 3.3 million adjusted profit per finished minute. So spread out across 5 releases, and with these numbers muddled, even with all that, it's pretty clear that Disney had found a way to kind of keep the animation studios afloat and make some money while cranking these out.
Andy, I will say this. I don't care anything about those numbers. What impresses me is I'm watching you say those numbers. I don't think you're reading anything. You were just talking that whole time.
Yeah, do you have a script on your monitor or something, just like taped on there?
He's just that brilliant. He's a budget savant.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive. Knew all the dates that went along with it. I'm just like, I'm trying to remember what I had.
Budgenator.
I don't remember what I had
That's
for
right.
breakfast. Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. Was Sleeping Beauty the movie right before 101?
It was.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 years
Okay,
before.
because that's what I remember the story being, is why this film was so important, that it was done quicker. It was less expensive because Sleeping Beauty almost broke the bank with them.
Yeah.
That was a film
It
that
did.
took them like 4 years, if I remember right, or longer. It was a long gestation. It was very painful. Every line had to be perfect. It was, you look at that film, it's amazing to see that these two came out back to back, basically.
Well, and so and they also created a whole new format for it. You remember it was like a ultra long frame.
I forget what it was
CinemaScope,
called, I think. Yeah.
It was CinemaScope.
Yeah.
I think it was the only animated feature by Disney ever done in CinemaScope. And because of that, there was just more real estate for painters to paint backgrounds and animators to fill with characters. And oh my gosh, that decision alone was a budget crippler. And then for them to turn around on 101 Dalmatians and go, ding, how about xerography? Xerography. We'll use that.
Photosynthesis. Let's just make up. I don't know.
I'll tell you guys one last little story about 101 Dalmatians that may or may not be interesting, but it's close for Tom and I. And
it might be true.
Is that and Tom doesn't even know what I'm going to say. In the movie 101 Dalmatians, you remember there was something called the Twilight Bark,
Right?
And this was the communication form that the dogs all had, right? So they would bark one to another and one to another to get a message over miles, right? So the Twilight Bark was the name when Tom and I were working at the Disney MGM Studios, the new animation studio in Florida, Orlando, Florida. We had a little newsletter, and it was called the Twilight Bark. So it was our way of getting, insider information and news about what's going on in feature animation for all of us.
Not to correct you too much, but I will. The Twilight Bark was the California newsletter for animation. We had the Rabbit in Florida.
Oh, I forgot.
And I still don't know why it was called the Rabbit, but it was based on Roger Rabbit, I think.
The Rabbit?
Yeah, it was based on Roger Rabbit, and it was also an English term because Max Howard was English. He's the guy that ran the studio, and it meant gossip. I think it was like an English slang for gossip news or something like that.
Your English listeners can tell us.
Twilight Bark was the newsletter that they had for many, many years at the Burbank, California studio. Thank you, Tom.
Just kind of keep you straight.
What are we ready to do this, Andy? Are we ready to rank it?
I think so. Do you guys have any last comments about the movie, or is that it?
Oh, and we could talk 101 forever, but
we could. Yes, we could.
I think we covered everything that nobody would want to hear or ever again.
Well, that's our goal.
Yeah.
One last comment that I want to throw out there, which I think is interesting. Disney has these 9 old men. I'm still not sure why some people got to be in that club and some people didn't. But of the 9 old men, only one did not work on this film, from what I could tell, and it was Ward Kimball. And I don't know if it was because he was writing.
That's right. He was probably off doing TV stuff and his own short films and stuff, because Ward kind of went a different direction after a while, and he wanted to do his own thing in TV and stuff. I think that's what he did.
And really, had he worked on this film, I bet you he would have got Cruella De Vil. That's kind of up his alley.
No, he would have got Horace and Jasper.
Oh,
Horace
yeah.
and Jasper,
That's true.
Or the sidekick animals or something.
Right.
That would have been him.
It's interesting. It's a fun little tidbit. I know that he was working on the live action Babes in Toyland just before this, so maybe he was tied up in that.
Yeah, he got into film, live action, and then they're directing short films like Toot Whistle Plunk and Boom. And
well, anyway, yeah, I guess it's time. We're gonna rank this thing.
We're gonna head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. If you scroll down in your show notes, you'll find the link that'll jump you right over to this very film, 101 Dalmatians, in Flickchart, and you're gonna rank it, add it to your library. We'd love to hear how it stacks up against our ranking right here.
First up, we've got 101 Dalmatians versus Mad Max.
the new Mad Max?
This is the original, the very first.
Oh, 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, I'm going to go 101. Yeah.
I'm 101 Dalmatians also. Pete, what about you?
So this is I'm also 101, and this is a principled victory. This Mad Max is right in the middle of our catalog, so that puts it in the top half of all the movies that we've done.
Oh,
that's good.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, here we go.
Next one up, we have 101 Dalmatians or Scarlet Street, Fritz Lang's film noir.
Oh,
Never
don't
seen
know
it.
that one. You got me.
Oh, it's fantastic. You should definitely see it, but I'm going to give it 101 on this one. I would watch
I am
101
too.
first. Yeah.
Me too. 101 Dalmatians. 101 Dalmatians or Aliens.
Oh,
the sequel,
Yeah, now we're
Aliens.
getting,
I'm going to go Aliens on that one.
really?
I
I know.
I'm doing
Yes,
101.
agrees.
I'm going 101 on that. It's more classic for sure.
I am Aliens on this one.
This is a movie of movie of my heart right there is Aliens. I gotta pick Aliens.
That's
What?
right.
I'm the only one. I can't believe that. Oh,
Loser.
it's my favorite Disney movie.
Mama loved me better. Mama loved me better.
She didn't know the real you, Tony.
Next up, we have 101 Dalmatians or The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Oh, I'm going to say 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, I am too. I'm sticking with it.
Sticking with
101.
Disney. I'm going to say Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Pete. Yeah, if we end up tying, we have to do a rock, paper, scissors to decide.
Which is almost more painful than the tie itself. I stand with the Bancroft brothers.
Right on.
Walt Peregoy would cuss you out and say thanks.
All right, 101 Dalmatians or Kramer versus Kramer.
Definitely 101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, I'm definitely going 101
I am
too.
too. Yeah.
Same here.
No,
That's
thanks.
all right. 4 of us going that way. 101 Dalmatians or The Fisher King.
101 Dalmatians.
Yeah, I'm still 101.
I think I'm Fisher King. It's awfully close to my heart.
Yeah. No.
All right, here's how this works.
It is a tough one.
One of you versus Andy, and you do you just count to 3. 1, 2, 3.
All right, Tom.
Okay.
We'll do it. All right. 1, 2, 3. Rock. Well, you
Oh.
gotta.
And then scissors.
Scissors.
Did I do it right?
Well, our listeners can't tell that actually that Tom did do scissors.
You did.
Yes.
Okay.
I did it early too, so he saw what I had and then still said rock.
He's like looking at it going, rock?
Rock would kill that.
Do it again.
All right, I'm not even going to do the video. I'm not going to move.
This is
okay?
great podcasting.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
1,
2, 3. Paper.
Tie on paper. All right.
Okay.
Let's do it
Dang
again.
it. 1, 2,
3.
3. Scissors. Ah!
Oh, you're kidding me.
All right. Here we go again.
1, 2, 3.
Scissors.
Iwerks.
I feel like we have to give it to Ub Iwerks because
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, Ub won.
Ub Iwerks trumps everything.
that's
It
a
Ub's
pretty
really does.
impressive call there.
Ub's like Popeye. He could take
That's
it.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
The man who invented everything. 101 Dalmatians or awfully a different tone. Apocalypse Now.
Oh.
Oh gosh. I mean, how do you? It's like two different
I know.
stratospheres.
This is
I know.
why.
But,
This is
but
why.
I'm gonna say 101 Dalmatians still.
101 Dalmatians for me too.
I would say Apocalypse Now is the stronger and better film, but I would definitely put 101 Dalmatians on first.
Yeah, no, I'll give it to 101. I'm
And here's the thing. You're on a desert island. How depressing would it be to watch 101? I mean, Apocalypse Now
Yeah, you're
over
right.
and over again.
on premise. You're absolutely right. We have to wipe that from.
Unfair scenario.
You'd have to watch 101 Dalmatians as kind of a mental sorbet after you watched Apocalypse Now, if that was the case. Yeah.
Right. It's the after dinner mint for you, right?
It really is. Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, that leaves 101 Dalmatians at spot 36 on our chart, smack dab between
Wow.
Aliens and Apocalypse Now. So I think it did pretty well for itself. I mean, this is out of 200, almost 280 movies. So I think that's a pretty solid place for it.
I think that's a good spot. Yeah, a good
In
spot
1,000
for it.
years, when the aliens are excavating our devastated planet and they find the flick chart ranking and wonder how the hell did 101 Dalmatians end up between Aliens and Apocalypse Now on any list at all?
Well, we do a star rating also out of 5 stars over on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. Out of 5 stars, what do you guys give this film? Is it a 5-star film for you, or what do you say?
Oh, no, I wouldn't go 5-star. This is Tony. I'm going to go, I'll go 4, though. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 too. Because to me, 5 is like, wow, that's like the top 10, So
Let me just ask while we're doing this, what is a quintessential 5-star Disney film for you guys?
Oh, Disney film?
Disney.
Gosh. Well, did you see Mulan?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Mulan is way up there. Yeah.
Oh, did I mention I directed that?
Yeah. Oh, you hadn't yet? That's amazing.
No, I'll definitely say Lion King. I'll go Lion King, though, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
I put that as a...
and I would say The Incredibles. I know it's Pixar, but
Yeah, it's an easy one for me. That's okay. Interesting. All right, Andy. For me, it's a 4-star too.
And I'm at 4-star also. So look at that. Straight 4s across the board for this.
Yeah, what a great pick, you guys. I had no idea we'd have such an awesome conversation about this movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious. What's your position on? Have you seen Moana, the latest yet? What's your take on it? On the progress, the march of progress on animation?
It's a good movie. There's some little weird things about it, some funky fly story things, but in general, really good, heartfelt movie. Actually, a very simple story, which I appreciated about it. They kind of kept it simple, and you just got into the characters, and that you don't see that very often, where it's actually a very small cast of characters, really just two main characters for most of the film, and you just stick with them.
I'm just going to jump in and go a little broader than that and say that Disney's got their groove back. I got to say, there was a time when Pixar was coming up and they were doing great things that Disney started going the other way. The Disney features of Meet the Robinsons and Sweating Bullets and things like that were like, oh my gosh, what's, pull up, please. And it took them a while to kind of get their groove going. But Disney's back and it's got its mojo. I'm really impressed with everything they've been doing lately, and they just keep getting better and stronger and better and stronger. Moana is definitely an example of that.
Have you guys seen it?
Oh yeah,
I love it. Although I've got to say, and this is kind of funny, the film that my family and I love, the animated film that has come out that has kind of taken all of us as the one that we really, really love, which is completely something I never, ever would have expected, is Trolls.
I knew you were going to say Trolls. I knew it because I feel the same way. Tom hasn't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it.
Trolls is a very fun, entertaining movie, isn't it?
Actually, I've heard that.
It's just like this magical film that is just like, I mean, you've got talking clouds and you've got like, weird creatures pooping cupcakes. And I mean, it's just...
Hey, spoiler alert. Wow.
That's in the trailer. That's in the trailer.
You know what I want to see is Mike Mitchell. This is going to go full circle for you guys. I want to see Mike Mitchell, the director of Trolls, direct the college version of Cruella De Vil and Anita together.
Sorority Sisters, Pillow Fight.
Sorority Sisters, 101 Late Nights or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what would it be called.
Right.
That would be so fun.
I would totally see it. And they're like frenemies, through the whole movie.
It'd be like Wicked.
Well, it's like Wicked. It's like Wicked.
Exactly.
It would be Wicked. Yeah. It would be just like
somebody totally needs to do that. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming and joining us. Where should people find you? And what are you guys, can they look up what you guys are working on? Where do you guys hang out online? Other than, obviously, you have your podcast and everything, but...
definitely check out the Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. It's on taught-by-a-pro.com, or it's on iTunes also. You can find both Tom and I on social media, on Facebook, where we have a page that we share called the Bancroft Brothers. We do a lot of updates of artwork that we're working on, or film and projects and just thoughts on animation and xerography are on the Facebook page. Yeah. And then you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, I'm at Pumbaa Guy, and Pumbaa is the character from The Lion King, and also has two A's, Pumbaa, Pumbaa Guy, and then I'm on Twitter at PumbaaGuy1. Tom.
And I'm on Instagram. I'm at Tom Bancroft1, and Twitter, Tom Bancroft1. And but follow our Facebook page too, the Bancroft Bros.
All right, we'll put all those in the show notes. Easy access.
And anything else you guys are working on that you want to plug? Or is it mostly just the podcast right now?
I have a film coming out next year, if all goes well, with distributor and such. It's an independent film that I've been working on for a couple of years with a good buddy of mine, and it's called Animal Crackers. And we have an all-star cast, guys that have done voices for Disney, such as my good friend Patrick Warburton is in it, and Danny DeVito, and Gilbert Gottfried, and Harvey Fierstein. But it also has Sir Ian McKellen does a voice, Gandalf, and John Krasinski and his wife Emily Blunt play the two main characters. So I'm really excited about Animal Crackers coming out next year. Look for it.
That's co-directed by a guy named Scott, so that must be where he came in to this podcast. Hey, Scott.
Now we've gone full circle.
He's a tiny little guy, and I'm just doing secret stuff. Some TV series that I'm developing right now, but also I'm teaching at Lipscomb University. So if you want to learn animation, come to Lipscomb Lipscomb University in Nashville.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming out and joining us tonight to talk about 101 Dalmatians. We really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
It was fun, you guys. You guys have you got a great podcast, and you guys are so professional.
You are.
We're so impressed.
We got goals.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it.
That means a lot coming from you guys.
Hashtag goals.
For everyone else out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you like what you heard, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, Pinterest, Letterboxd, Flickchart, and YouTube. And, of course, don't forget to head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a comment. It really does help more people find us. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, I've got a dog barking out back, and I need to go listen in. I think it was one long howl and a yip, or was it two yips? I'm gonna use you to be my friend.
And we're out.
That's the end.
That's how you guys exit the show? What is that from?
That was from 101 Dalmatians.
Oh, sorry.
That was the Twilight Bark, stupid.
It was that newsletter that you never actually
I don't know.
wrote.
It sounded so scripted. It sounded like so scripted. I thought, did Andy just make that up? Or that must be, it sounded like a Quentin Tarantino line.
No.
I don't know.
I love having these wonderful chats on movies we like with all these industry guests talking about some of their favorite movies.
So many great conversations on that show about so many great movies.
We have so much fun having these conversations, but producing the show week after week does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these incredible conversations.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all the adapted film discussions on the Next Reel's family of podcasts. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
It's your one-stop shop for Amazon and Apple links where you can buy your copy of the original source material.
Original material for movies we like, movies like Casino Royale,
The Silent Partner,
Never Let Me Go,
Silver Linings Playbook,
There Will Be Blood, based on Upton Sinclair's Oil.
I believe it's Oil!
Oh yeah, I forgot the exclamation point.
Plus, by using those links to buy your next read, Apple and Amazon show us a little bit of love, which allows you to support our family of shows with minimal effort.
thenextreel.com/originals. It's a great way to support the show and find your next page turner.
That's right. Head over to thenextreel.com/originals to pick out your next read and dig in today.